Welcome back to State and Local. I have another candidate here today. That would be Hunter Cohen, whom I'm fond of. He's one of my favorite liberals, and he's running in the Democrat primary to unseat Sean Dooley for state rep. So Hunter, now I know you've talked a lot about your campaign, but what other things can we get into today about your campaign and what you want to do, and why you're going forward with this?
Absolutely. About 6 months ago now, we officially launched our campaign in the Eagle Brook Saloon on a cold February night.
Oh.
Yeah. And, the purpose of the campaign then was to kind of bring a progressive challenge to the status quo at Beacon Hill broadly and in the Commonwealth kind of globally. Because in a lot of ways, I see a very pressing need for progressive reform at the state level, because there are a lot of issues that specifically face our district that have really not been addressed in recent years. One of the big planks of my platform is that of higher education and tuition reform. And one of the things keenly that I've seen is that, according to the Massachusetts Department of Education and many other sources, we've seen a kind of level off and in some cases decreases in spending at our state universities for just general operating costs, tuition costs across the board. We've seen this, which is concerning considering the fact that, over 50% of the families in our district will end up sending one of their kids to a state university. So this is an issue that keenly affects the majority of our district, but it's not being addressed right now by the State House. So again, when we first started this campaign, that was the goal, and that was kind of why I was running. But as we've kind of progressed in the season, COVID-19 and the civil unrest that's been occurring throughout the country have really, I think, recontextualized the purpose of this campaign and what we're kind of pointing towards going forward. Because, look, before COVID-19, I'd say there was a pressing need for progressive leadership at the state level. But I'd say now, after COVID-19 and everything that's been going on recently, I've seen an urgent need for progressive policies at the state level. Because, we've seen, as COVID-19 has kind of worn on, we've seen failure of leadership at the state level in a few interesting ways. We've seen them kind of lag behind on ensuring free and universal testing across the Commonwealth at a level quality. We've seen them kind of slag behind on protecting our essential workers, who are in many instances putting their lives at risk and don't have the health insurance they need to take time off if they're sick. And we really haven't seen any leadership on the state level to ensure universal vaccination when a vaccine is discovered. So I think before there was a pretty pressing need for progressive leadership, but now after COVID, I think there's an urgent need for progressive leadership and progressive reform, at the state level. And part of my candidacy is to offer that to the people of Ninth Norfolk, who I think would benefit from it.
Now, Hunter, about the vaccinations and the testing, what have you heard that leads you to think that's the case?
So,
or have you not heard? Maybe that was more of what you didn't hear.
So the disparities in testing, have been pretty widely noted throughout the Commonwealth. But I think to kind of give an anecdotal bit of evidence, my friend Ben, who's campaign manager and has been an absolute great asset to this campaign, great friend for a very long time, thought he might have had COVID-19. He was, running a low grade for a long time. And he did get tested. His insurance was thankfully good enough to get him tested. But he was not able to afford one of the expedited tests. It took him, well over a week to get the results of his test back. And meanwhile, a lot of concierge services, have been able to have very quick turnaround on testing. So, while a lot of people can get access to testing, it's not typically at a level quality, and the results are not given, quickly, which can derail people's lives, in this crucial time. In very time, getting your life derailed for a week while you're waiting on pins and needles, for a COVID test to come back is terrifying. It was terrifying to go through that with him. So, and there really hasn't been any initiative from the state to ensure level quality and free testing. Well, a lot of people can get access to it. It still comes at a cost, and the quality is not level.
So there's
So
no standard of testing in as far as you know?
I mean, there are medical standards. There are licensing for these clinics, and so there are standards for testing, but the turnaround of testing time is kind of what's a really big issue at this point. And as I've said, you see a fair amount of range from turnaround on testing, and especially for essential workers, who really can't, in some instances, are either being forced to work through sickness and don't know if they have COVID or not, are forced to take time off from their essential job while they're waiting for their test results to come back. Either way, it is a huge harm to them and a huge harm to their families. So I think there's a lot that the state can be doing.
And if they're contagious, it's a harm to everybody else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Ann. So
now, by essential worker, what do you mean?
Essential worker are folks who need to work in person, specifically, in food service jobs, takeaway, post office, police officers.
Oh, I see. Okay.
EMT, those essential workers. And in a lot of times they're put very heavily in harm's way, and oftentimes for minimum wage. So one of the proposals that I'm looking at for when I assume office in January, and we're still unfortunately going to be in the throes of COVID, is to institute hazard pay for essential workers. That would be time and a half pay, to recognize the profound risk that they're taking, while doing the job.
I thought that was in effect in some areas.
Yeah, in some areas, but there has not been a statewide mandate for that to be across the board. And I think, these essential workers are taking profound risks to keep our economy rolling. I mean, and it's awful that they have to take these risks, but I think while these risks are being taken, I think we should recognize their labor and recognize, the profound service. Yeah, the profound service that they're performing for our communities.
Now, I just saw something I guess it was on one of the Facebook groups about requiring vaccine. It seemed as if it was news requiring vaccines in the fall. Well, as far as I know, you always had to be vaccinated to go to public school.
Yeah, I think, I forget exactly which vaccine it is required, but I think it might be a new requirement. But yes, broadly speaking, you are correct. To attend a public school, there are certain vaccinations you do need before heading in for the fall. So I'm not quite sure specifically about what you're referring to, but that does sound familiar.
It was just portraying that as kind of a new thing. And when I was working, I mean, it was required to go in. Now tell me, what else do you, what are the other issues that you feel you'd like to be a, agent for change in?
So as I have said, higher education reform was and still is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And while I have a very, very good scholarship to UMass, and throughout my education, for me personally, paying for my education will not be an issue. A lot of folks aren't as lucky, and this part of the effects of the state spending less and less on education year after year is we see, less money being allocated for scholarship funds, which is, crucial for a lot of people being able to afford to go to school in state. But we've also seen a decrease in the quality of services that universities can provide. So for UMass Amherst, and this is pretty consistent across most state university, the state only kicks in about a quarter of the operating costs. So 25% of the costs needed for the school to run are kicked in by the state. The rest, it's a very, very small amount. The rest being covered in tuition and fees. And this has the added effect of really giving state universities a profound amount of budget instability year to year. So part of my, one proposal I'm looking to pass through is an existing piece of legislation that would fund our state universities at 100%, which would provide tuition-free college to students who qualify for state universities who are in state, while also eliminating that budget instability and allowing our state universities to make more concrete budget allocation plans year to year, which I think is absolutely crucial for them to be able to provide, quality services to all of their students.
Now, do you think if there weren't if there weren't tuition being paid? I mean, I know I see an awful lot of what I would consider to be luxury items at the college where I go, all kinds of events and this, that, and the other, and landscaping and fancy buildings and special meals and events. I mean, how can that be? I mean, if what you're saying is the way to go, how can all that extra stuff be provided?
So yeah, private universities are kind of able to do a lot of that. They're able to, have the fancy landscaping, do what they need to, they're private universities in many instances. So private universities, much like with private schools, if you are accepted into a private university, you can, that's kind of not what we're looking at for this. What we're looking at are public universities. So right now, in the short term, what the plan that I am looking for is tuition, is making it tuition free in the short term, but with housing and dining still being paid by the student, with the long-term goal of phasing out the dining and housing costs to, basically allow students to, get tuition-free college and get what they need to pursue an education. So you do see a lot of that in private universities, but at UMass, and in many of the state universities, they barely have the money they need for building repairs, maintenance, staff fees, that sort of thing. So, yeah. So public universities, I absolutely want to see tuition free. Private universities, I'd like to see some retooling how we do student loans and student loan forgiveness on that side. But as how we do with public schools at primary and secondary education, it would be, you have a public school option that you can go to, that your tax money pays for. But if you wish, you can attend a private university.
Well, that's true. I know where you're going. You're at the flagship of UMass, which is where I went for graduate school, and I imagine they do have endowments over there because they've had a lot of really successful people, and the other campuses as well. But I mean, it's really notable at UMass Amherst, and but I know it wouldn't compare to some place like, well, not so much Wheaton, because it's, in the past, it was almost all women graduates. But I mean, some place like, say, Middlebury or one of these places, or, Harvard and Yale. Now, sorry. Have you had any interaction with any of the leaders at Beacon Hill? Have you talked with any of them about your candidacy?
I've spoken with a few members of Beacon Hill and a couple of candidate hopefuls about my candidacy.
You probably know Becca Roche.
Yes, I interned at her office. But
oh, really?
Yes, I did. I had the profound pleasure to be able to serve as one of her legislative interns, and that was an absolutely amazing experience. But I have spoken with a few people on Beacon Hill, but it's most of my outreach right now has been towards other candidates who are running in adjacent districts around. Andrew Flowers, who's running for
I've seen his name.
I've had the profound privilege of being able to speak to him a little bit, and our policy and our overall progressive message are similar in many aspects. So we've had time to kind of talk to each other and stay in contact. And even Michael Dooley, who's in 10th Norfolk, I believe, I've been able to speak with him. So I've kind of, while I have had some time to speak with some folks on Beacon Hill, the lion's share of my contact and the lion's share of my coordinating has been with folks who are running as progressives on the grassroots level. Because we are running an insurgent campaign in many ways. Part of the goal of this campaign is to present a challenge to the sort of more
business as usual.
business as usual in Beacon Hill. So I've kind of tried to make really good connections with some of the other insurgents who are running similar campaigns and have a similar ethos to mine, and would be, who's our interests. Our districts have similar interests because, Andrew and I would share Walpole if we were to come in, and Mike would share Walpole. So there is a geographic interest that we have in talking with each other, but also, a philosophical interest, I think, where we can really work together to really make some progressive progress in Massachusetts if we get elected.
If one of you doesn't, or both of you don't make it in, you do have this connection, to work in other ways and to keep going and, and try again. Your opponent, I think this is his third time running for state rep. But, I think things are locked down. I think things are locked down pretty tightly about what individual reps or maybe even senators can do or say. And I say that because, campaigns that I've worked on, I've heard that, well, at least among, the Republicans, the Republican side is very small. But I do happen to know, for example, Sean O'Connell, who ended up becoming, I guess she just wanted to be the mayor of Taunton, but I think she had such a hard time, fighting for things that the leadership didn't want, and they will take you off committees and put you on committees. And it's just, I don't like what I've heard about the way things are run up there and who you have to play up to and who you have to deal with. And this, there's.
Yeah, we have on Beacon Hill, we do have a very high concentration of power in party leaders. And I think it's really time that we kind of shift away from this top-heavy leadership structure and really start accepting more ideas from the rank and file, who in many cases, are very energized individuals who are coming to leadership with a lot of really good ideas and a lot of really cool new progressive ideas that we can start to maybe implement, at the state level. We have a lot of rank and file members who are pushing for things like Medicare for all in the Commonwealth, and they'll propose the bill, they'll write it up, they'll be fine, really good bills, and then it'll be silenced from the committee that they get referred to. The healthcare committee will, accept it, and then, it'll sit there for a long time, and likely be killed by a committee vote. Whereas
look at all the Senate presidents that have gone to jail. I'm trying to remember their names right now, but I think there's been 3. And I think Leo was a little bit on the ropes too.
Yeah, Karen Spilka right now is doing pretty good work right now. My criticisms of her are kind of more unanimous with the criticisms I have of the party leaders in general. But so far, her track record has been pretty decent, which is good to see. But definitely in the House, especially because the state Senate runs a little bit more progressive than the House if we're just kind of looking at the aggregate of all of the political views and the political views of the senators there. It tends to run a little bit more progressive.
Oh, yes.
But in the state House, the House of Representatives, we absolutely see a huge concentration of power, at the top, at the, the Speaker of the House, the committee chairs, I absolutely agree. We need to start seeing some more ideas coming in and really being seriously debated and entertained from the rank and file members. This one representative proposed a piece of legislation that would run an experiment on universal basic income in the Commonwealth, where 100 families would receive a guaranteed income monthly for a little while. And they would study the effects of how that changed their spending habits, how that improved their lives and what have you, which I think would be a tremendous experiment, to see how it works. But that's really been sitting, in committee for a long time, and we really haven't seen any progress on that. And it's just, our democracy, and I think legislatures thrive when new ideas are being proposed, debated, and experimented on.
Well, I've heard that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a while, but I've heard that they didn't really even want to do roll call on the votes.
Typically, no, they don't do roll call votes. Yeah.
I think they should, don't you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know, representatives and senators should stand up, cast their vote proudly, and yeah, and voters, if they disagree, should be able to hold them accountable. I absolutely agree. And accountability is one of the key planks of my platform, because I think there's a certain level of accountability we really need to bring to the State House. I signed the Act on Mass Voters Deserve to Know pledge last month.
Oh, now what's that? Tell about that, because I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so the Act on Mass Voters Deserve to Know pledge is, broadly speaking, a promise of accountability. And it ensures that I'll do a couple of things.
Oh, yes. Okay, go ahead.
So one of the most important things it would necessitate is, if I was asked by another member of the legislature to stand for a roll call vote, I would, which I absolutely plan to if I get elected. It's important, and I think, you know, we absolutely need we need our representatives to make plainly known their positions and their votes. It also constitutes a promise that if I chair or have a leadership position in any committee throughout my tenure as state representative, that I will publish all testimonies and all votes from that committee, because while legislature-wide votes are recorded and we can see how our reps vote, we don't have any guarantee to see their votes and how they vote in the committees that they serve on, which in many instances, you know, are where these pieces of legislation, you know, are going to live or die. So
Well, that was my point about Shauna, that she was removed from different committees because they didn't like what she had to say.
yeah.
And I guess
Yep.
it's their power to do so, but I thought it was terrible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, committee votes and committees at the State House are notoriously obtuse, hard to enter, and really really not transparent. You know, and the third and final, and I think the most important aspect of the Act on Mass Voters Deserve to Know pledge is, over the course of my tenure as state representative, any committee that I am a member of, I will make public every single one of my votes in that committee, which, the current rules being what they are, I don't have to do, but I think it's absolutely crucial that I do.
And you
So,
can? I
pardon?
mean, you can as an individual in a committee?
Yes, I can individually publish my votes, but, you know, the committee itself has no obligation to publish
Oh, right.
votes or testimony. And even kind of going beyond the scope of the pledge, I would really like to see rules reform, you know, in how they conduct committees and hearings in the State House. I would like to see rules reform to publicize all testimony from committees, and really make public all committee votes, because, I mean, that'll bring an important amount of transparency to the State House, I think. And I
I
think
agree
that,
with you. I agree. Now, why? Well, I understand you wanted to, you know, take this opportunity, and of course, you know, you're a little older now, so that you can go for it. Because I think at the, you know, 4 years ago, you were too young. But what would you do differently from Dooley?
well, I think in terms of my voting record, you would see a much more receptive representative and a much more progressive representative, because Mr. Dooley has voted against a number of, I mean, it isn't even a progressive versus conservative. I think it's decency versus non-decency. And
Give an
Representative,
example. Can you think of an
oh,
example of?
100%. Last year, or in 2018, there was a bill that came up in the legislature that would ban the practice of conversion therapy for LGBTQ plus individuals. So that's, you know, that would ban physical conversion therapy, which is one of the most insidious aspects of conversion therapy. But it would also ban talk therapy, which is the practice of a psychiatrist
Really?
or mental health professional.
And the therapy?
Well, ban talk therapy, which is the practice
Really?
of a psychiatrist
No, I
or mental
understand.
health professional going to an LGBTQ plus individual and trying to talk them out of their sexual orientation or sexual identification. So it would ban that practice, which, you know, America, there has been plenty of research to prove that type of therapy is harmful and not
It doesn't
effective,
work.
and it doesn't work, and it causes tons of harm. So this bill came up, and Sean Dooley voted against it.
Oh, it came up to ban it.
It came up to ban.
I got it mixed up.
Yeah.
Oh.
It came up to ban the practice, and Sean Dooley voted against it.
I thought among psychotherapists it just wasn't done anymore. It was taken out. I mean, even homosexuality was taken out of the DMS for psychiatry. I mean,
Yeah.
apart from anything trans, even homosexuality isn't.
It's an interesting thing because, you know, while you don't necessarily hear it as a widespread practice, you know, until 2018 in Massachusetts, talk therapy was perfectly legal. You could not be decertified for it. So it was perfectly legal in the Commonwealth, and in many other perfectly legal practice. But this bill came up, which banned the practice, and Representative Dooley voted against it, which is, you know, extraordinarily concerning to see a state representative that's so unwilling to be a voice for his LGBTQ plus constituents. So I'd really like to see the representative of 9th Norfolk being a champion for LGBTQ plus rights, you know, and pushing, you know, for increased protections and even looking to institute, you know, more sexual education on gender identification and sexuality, which is absolutely important for young students to be able to, you know, to comfortably be who they are.
Hunter, was there something else in that bill that he objected to and therefore voted against the whole bill? Do you happen to know? Were there the riders or whatever they called that?
And he was quoted on this. He does not believe that the state should get between a medical provider and a patient, which I don't think holds water because the medical provider is engaging in a practice that is actively harmful. You know, that's like saying, you know, a doctor who breaks my leg shouldn't be reprimanded because that's between a patient and a doctor, if you understand my meaning. So, I mean, that's his reasoning, but I think the reasoning, you know, I think the reasoning is hiding something more insidious. And I mean, I hope to be wrong on that, but I can't help but wonder.
Well, is it, we're just about at time, Hunter. Was there any last thing you would like to say to viewers, voters?
Yeah, so voting is open between now and September 1st, and it's been open for the whole of the month of August. So if you've already voted, I hope that I had earned your vote already. But if you are still looking to vote, there is early voting all next week, mail-in ballots until the 26th of August, I believe. For specifics on in-person voting, you can look at your town clerk on your town websites, which is going to be important towards getting the specifics. And, you know, no matter who you vote for, voting is absolutely crucial in the time of COVID-19, exercising your democratic right. And if you have any concerns about, you know, the USPS or mail, every single clerk in the district has a drop box where you can very safely and comfortably.
Yes, they do. They do, which is right. Yeah.
You can very safely and comfortably drop off your ballot.
Exactly.
And, you know, I hope over the course of this interview, I have made a reasonable case for my candidacy, and I hope I can count on your vote in the September 1st Democratic primary.
Well, thank you, Hunter. And listen, good luck to you, Hunter. And enjoyed speaking with you. And this is Anne Marie Battistone on NCTV. You've been watching State and Local. My guest was Hunter Cohen. He's running in the Democrat primary for a state rep in our district. So please, you know, give him a look, and I hope we provided some information for you today. And thank you for watching Norfolk Public Access.